Welcome all, and thank you for joining us today. This is Anamika Gupta, and I head customer marketing for Fujitsu America, and I'm delighted to be here with you. Fujitsu is the world's fifth largest IT service provider and number one in Japan, with 85 years of experience in the IT industry. But what I am most proud of is our belief in human-centric technology. We have continued to evolve our passion for unlocking innovation with our clients and partners. COVID-19, and we were just talking with Romain about this, has impacted each of us worldwide, but it has also challenged us to do things differently, push boundaries, and be empathetic. Today, I'm excited to have the global CIO of a very reputed organization join us. The organization which is committed to spreading smiles, one piece at a time, for the past 100 years. And they pushed all the boundaries to keep that promise even amidst pandemic and save the long-standing tradition of fun Halloween celebration in the US. But they are not stopping there. Plan is to continue innovating in the months and years to come and make sure smiles are continuing to spread with no boundaries. This organization needs no guesswork. You guys got it right. It's Mars Wrigley, which brings iconic products like M&M's, Snickers, Orbit, Extra, and Skittles. Enjoyed in more than 180 countries. And it's none other than Romain Apert himself joining us, who will not just share what went into digitizing Halloween 2020, but what's the thinking behind the digital capabilities and mindset shifts. Why is learning so important in today's FMCG world? How Mars Digital Engine is empowering Mars associates to create value 100 times faster today. So grab some of your favorite brands, like I have my favorite M&M to munch on and hold on to your seat. Welcome, Romain. I'm so looking forward to hearing from you today on how you and your team deliver on your commitment to spreading smiles, even amidst pandemic. As Global CIO of Mars Wrigley, Romain Apert is responsible for driving the digital transformation agenda while continuing to deliver effectiveness and efficiency to existing business and technology platforms. In the last 2 years, and following completion of the successful integration of Mars Wrigley, Romain has driven a new wave of consumer and user centricity, unleashed the power of data, analytics, AI, and automation while driving new agile and digital behaviors across functions and geographies. As a member of the Mars Wrigley leadership team, Romain has been fostering a culture of exploration and reinforcement learning, leveraging Bayesian mindset and techniques to continuously evolve key beliefs as we learn new information about the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous VUCA world, and ultimately create differentiating value for Mars Wrigley. Romain has been based between the United Kingdom, France, and the United States. He holds a degree in general engineering from ICAM Lyon and brings more than 20 years of digital experience to the CPG industry. But before I pass on the stage to Romain, I also want to welcome my CEO, Kinami-san, to say a few words.
Thank you, Amanika. Welcome, Romain. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mike Kiname from Fujitsu America. Today, we are very much looking forward sharing your perspective on the digital capability and the mindset shift with the Triton as the use case, which is fun, and that's a new experience, but also for the digital age, new eras, it's going to be a common and popular. I know I and my colleagues and the clients are so excited for this session today to hear how you and your team revolutionize a new way for families to celebrate Halloween, a long-standing holidays traditions, by enabling them to virtually trick or treat. Thank you for being one of our most valuable clients and giving us an opportunity to work with you to successfully digitize and modernize your order management systems, along which include your B2B and D2C customer experience. By deploying the Fujitsu Global OM platform for Mars Wrigley, US, as we successfully did for Royal Canin in your pet care division. It is our pleasure working with you and your great team in your digital transformation journey and enabling the Mars Wrigley to grow revenue by a new revenue streams, all while delivering a world-class customer experience. Our partnership has a bright future together. Thank you. Over to Anamika.
Thank you, Kinami-san. And before the session starts, just a few things. I definitely want each one of us here on the call today or with us on the session today to make it interactive. Please keep your questions posting in the comment section. We will have a dedicated 15 minutes for Q&A towards the end. And the session is being recorded, and we will share the session recording with all the registered participants. So with that, over to you, Romain.
Thank you so much, Anamika. Thank you so much, Kiname. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be presenting today, to have a chance to present to such a community. My objective today is simple, to share some of the learning I've been through, my past 20 years at Mars, but more specifically the last 3 years, as I've been into a journey of transformation. Again, you heard Anamika talking about my journey at Mars. I could summarize the first 17 years as very much of a traditional IT back office. The last 3 years have been a journey of digital transformation. And when I started that journey, I was really expecting to learn a lot about technology and machine learning. But I was nowhere near close to realize that I would spend most of my time learning about anthropology, which is the study of human being and human learning. So today you will hear a lot about learning, and I will start to hopefully inspire you with one story that inspired me at the beginning of this journey. It's the story of Andrew Wiles. Andrew Wiles is a British mathematician that managed to prove Fermat's last theorem in 1993, which is the theorem you can see in front of you, made by Pierre de Fermat more than 350 years ago. And despite the fact that this theorem is quite easy to understand, it's an extrapolation of Pythagoras' theorem, it was really difficult for a mathematician to crack. In fact, Andrew himself took 7 years to prove that theorem right. And there is a beautiful documentary on the BBC where Andrew is being interviewed, and he's basically comparing his own journey to prove that theorem. He used the analogy of a dark room, a room where it's very dark. You cannot see anything. You move to your right and you bump into a furniture. You move to your left and your head is clashing on a TV that is on a wall that obviously you cannot see. But as you get bruises along the way, you start to acquire information and you start to make sense of that room. And the more information you get, the more likely you increase your chance to find your way to the switch. And one day you find the switch, you turn the switch on, and everything is very clear. And I find this to be a beautiful metaphor of what many are calling a digital transformation, which is no more no less than a bunch of leaders, including myself, who have been relatively successful in a very bright room where you know exactly how everything is fitting, and suddenly you are thrown into a dark room. And the challenge here is not to be stuck by the fact that the room is dark. The challenge is to find your way to the switch. And so the story today is a story of learning, is a story of finding your switch in a dark room. And so I spent a lot of time looking at epistemology, which is really the scientific method, which is the learning method, which is an exploration approach to try again to stay relevant and competitive in a room that is much darker than usual. And usually that journey is a journey which starts with observations. You acquire data with your ear, with your eyes, with the internet potentially. You try to identify insights and patterns to explain those observations. And then you make hypotheses about those insights. And then you need to pressure test those hypotheses. And when you pressure test the hypothesis, then you build theory and key beliefs. And not only that approach is an inductive approach, it's the scientific method, but to be relatively effective going through this approach, you need also a certain set of skills and mindset. And I've tried to share with you some of the quotes from famous scientific people or poets like Muriel Rukeyser to try to show the type of mindset needed to be successful in a learning approach. Probably the most important one is the one from Ray Solomonoff, which together with Alan Turing is the father of artificial intelligence and machine learning. The golden egg was not as exciting as the goose that laid it. So, you know, when you find a golden egg, are you obsessed about the golden egg, or are you trying to focus on the why question to understand the mechanics behind the golden eggs, which is the goose? Another important quote is from John Tukey. An approximate answer to the right question is worth far more than a precise answer to the wrong one. And this is important because if you are very, very comfortable in a bright room and suddenly you are in a dark room, you need to be careful not to jump too quickly from a problem statement to a solution. You need to spend a lot of time to observe, to really make sense of that problem, to make sure that if you start to resolve that problem, you do it for the right problem. And you need to do this with a lot of humility. You know, take the quote from John von Neumann: truth is much too complicated to allow anything but approximation. Similar quote from George Box: all models are wrong, but some are useful. So let's not spend too much time with the battle of opinion. Let's step back and let's look at ways to find, you know, useful learning approach, useful theory, and key beliefs about the world. And the reason I spend time to talk about this learning process is actually one of the meta hypotheses, is that learning is key for FMCG, for CPG, to stay relevant and competitive in an increasing VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. So let me try to go a little bit deeper and explain what I mean by that. What you see in front of you is pretty much the value creation model since World War II. It's the value creation model for CPG, relying on 5 strategic pillars: mass marketing, mass innovation, customer centricity and not consumer centricity, a high reliance on developing market expansion, a best-in-cost value creation model, and finally mergers and acquisition as a growth accelerator. And what you see on the right is a number of emerging disruptive trends. You know, this is an adapted model from McKinsey, but if you look at Bain and other consulting companies, it's usually the same. Sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 10, but you can recognize, and there is now a relatively large consensus that those disruptive trends are actually faltering the value creation model. So lowering growth opportunity and lowering profitability. So we basically need to complement, not replace, what I call the traditional FMCG exploitation approach, which is very much of a deductive approach. That approach starts with theory and key beliefs. Those are all the theory and key beliefs that, you know, have been demonstrated in the past 20, 30, 50 years. You know, when you know so well a bright room, when you know how to go from point A to point B, you know, you don't think very much. You just try to deploy those theory and key beliefs at speed and at scale, and you just observe that the impact is happening the way you expected it to happen. But this approach is very effective in a world that is relatively, you know, slowly changing. And by definition, a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, is really changing very fast. So again, you need to complement, not replace, this exploitation approach, this deductive approach, with an exploration approach, which is a learning approach. And what's very important is the starting point to an exploration approach is not the theory and key belief, it's actually the observation. And that's why at Mars, 3 years ago, we put so much emphasis on building a dedicated user centricity team where we bring associates, customer, and consumer at the center of everything we do. So we can understand straight from those end users what are the problems we are trying to address. And we do it, you know, using design thinking, which is a non-pathetic methodology to hear a lot of diverse input about the world. You know, we could be talking to consumer directly, we could be talking to Mars associates, across a variety of functions to try to make sense of complex problems, really observing the world through the end user lens. Once we identify the problem statement, then this is when we can start to solve existing problem a little bit differently. And this is where, in the last 3 to 5 years, we have seen a tsunami of new technology. This one is the Gartner hype curve from 2018. And, in the past 20 years, I cannot remember having seen so much new technology at the top of the hype curve, which means we need to be careful of the concept of macromyopia, which is the tendency to overestimate the short-term impact of a new technology, but also to underestimate its long-term impact. And so we need to be mindful, not to invest, hundreds of millions of dollars on all this technology, but there are some pockets of opportunity. If you take something like machine learning is already today changing the world upside down. So it's important to be self-aware and to pick the right technology to solve purposefully some end-user consumer problem. And we need to do this, which is again something very different to the first 17 years in my career, with a massive focus on speed and agility. This is an extract of 1 week in the news in 2019. And at the time when we did that, we were wondering, well, maybe that particular week is more heavy than usual. I think everyone who's been through 2020 will probably agree that doing the same snapshot in 2020 is even more scary in terms of the number of changes happening at the same time. And this is an important call to action because it forces us to look at resolving problems differently. Again, the 17 years of my career, I've been living in big deployment world, which could be summarized as go big or go home. You spend you spend a few weeks to identify what is the North Star you want to chase. You do a few months of development, of testing, of deployment, and by the time the solution is available on the market, sometimes the consumers has moved on, and that trend has accelerated significantly in the past 5 years, which forced us to shift the thinking from this go big or go home to more of a think big, start small, and act fast type of mentality, where we make a conscious decision to decouple businesses, by modules, whether it's product development, production, fulfillment, and again, trade off on the interconnectivity of all those different modules together, but to try to solve all of them one after the other, with a lot of humility, and only after try to connect them. And again, this is a much more practical way to make sense of a complexity that is moving extremely fast. So again, you heard me talking about the importance of learning, the traditional value creation model. And here I'm making a list of hypotheses of the type of capability that are important in a new value creation model. User centricity, of course, with a huge focus on consumer centricity, as well as customer centricity and employee centricity. Purposeful innovation, which is leveraging data, AI, and new technology, not for the sake of using it, but to solve the problems identified by design thinking and user centricity, and then to do this with a strong focus on speed and agility. And I would say at Mars, we have a strong focus on personal development. And as much as I am confident that everyone, assuming we spend quality time to prioritize personal development, we will be able to learn new business capability. We will be able to learn new technology as well as agile ways of working. What's most difficult to learn? So the two most important learning barriers, it's to learn at speed and to learn to relearn, which is the concept of unlearning agility. And so instead of trying to spend a lot of time explaining the concept of unlearning agility and why this is one of the most important capability for leaders to thrive in an increasing VUCA world, we're going to play a small game. It's called the Monty Hall Challenge. It's a game that was aired in the US in the 70s. It's a very simple game. Many of you might know this game. The purpose of the game is to pick a door behind 3 doors and to find a luxury car behind this door. So you have door number 1, you have door number 2, you have door number 3. Monty Hall, the presenter, will ask you to pick a door. And you need obviously to pick the door with the luxury car. Behind the 2 other doors are 2 goats, which means you're not going to win anything if you pick those doors. So for the sake of the exercise, let's start the game and let's pick one door. Let's pick door number 3. But before revealing what's behind door number 3, Monty Hall will always reveal one of the 2 doors you have not picked. And behind this door, you will always see a goat. So again, let's play the game. We pick door number 3. Monty Hall is opening door number 2, and we see a goat behind door number 2. As you can imagine, the simple question that Monty Hall is now asking you is, what are you doing? Are you sticking to your original choice, or do you switch door? So let me give you a few seconds here, and I've done this game many times. Usually I try to ask the audience and we try to have a conversation. Because we are so many, I'm going to go into usually the 3 types of response I'm getting in this game. The first type of response, and that's usually 50–60% of the audience, they stick to their choice. And when we ask, why do you stick to your choice? Usually the response is, okay, I've picked door number 3, I can see a goat behind door number 2, but technically you have not changed anything in the background. So the probability of 33% is still the same probability. That is not the right answer. Then you get 20–25% of participants, they say that they switch. But when you ask them, why do you switch? They basically say, okay, before we had 33% chance of winning, now it's 50%. But if it's 50%, you can switch, you can stick, it's the same probability. The right answer, and it's very rare to hear in the audience someone giving the right answer and the right justification, is that you should always switch. Because if you always switch, you double your chance of winning. You increase from 33% chance of winning to 66% chance. And I can prove that to you in many different ways. I can do a mathematical demonstration, we can play the game together, but that's not the point. The point of this game is to ask you a simple question. How do you feel right now? What's going in your body? Do you trust me? Don't you trust me? Do you want to prove me wrong? Are you confused? So ask yourself the type of emotions that are going through your body. Because asking yourself what types of emotions are going through your body right now is the best way to touch the learning barrier. Most of the time, including myself, when I played that game, I was stuck. I was not able at this point in time to process that information. And the reason I was not able to process that information is that I was fighting against my intuition. My intuition was telling me something, and the game was telling me something else. So what's the lesson here? The lesson is we are dealing in an increasing VUCA world. So, we are used to living in a bright room. Suddenly we are thrown in a dark room. And so the level of complexity and uncertainty has significantly increased. So what we might think being something simple is in reality a lot more complex than we think. The game of the Monty Hall challenge has created massive debate even in the mathematical field. So it appears simple on the surface, it's actually quite a complex game. And so once you reach, the complexity world, you need to be very self-aware of a beautiful quote from Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Righteous Mind, Intuition First, Strategic Reasoning Second, which is, intuition is a result of a human evolution, usually to survive. It's very efficient to survive, but it's not very efficient to think deeply about complex problems. And when you combine this over-reliance on intuition with another cognitive bias, which is confirmation bias, and that's the tendency for human beings to use the data to tell the story our brain wants to hear, as opposed to trying to be as close to the reality as possible. So, what's the, what's the guide to survive in this world? First of all, is to be very self-aware of all those cognitive bias. Everyone, including myself, is full of cognitive bias. But then make sure we use this self-awareness to welcome, to embrace adaptive problem-solving methodology, which start with design thinking. And usually when you do design thinking, you put your judgment on the side to try not to be too much biased by your own intuition, and you try to build prototype as fast as possible so you can use those prototypes, to increase your learning and to experiment. And you need to do this, with a mindset where you foster a culture of reinforcement learning. And, I can go deep here. What's behind reinforcement learning is something more fundamental, which is called Bayesian philosophy. If I try to summarize it, it's to answer a simple question: how to know? And if I summarize the way to learn, you have to start with your initial key beliefs, and you have to deploy those key beliefs. But then you need to complement this exploitation approach with an exploration approach, where you confront your key beliefs with what you observe in the world, and you accept to infer your key beliefs and update them. And sometimes you will slightly change some key beliefs. Sometimes it might create some radical change in key beliefs. Sometimes you might create key beliefs from scratch. So again, I won't go too much into the mathematics here. I'll just, use the concept of reinforcement learning to make sure that, when you are again in a dark room, you welcome the information and you use, this cognitive bias self-awareness to use that information to, to learn. So the Mars Digital Engine is actually a simple 3-step reinforcement learning process powered by agile ways of working, which start with design thinking. So finding the right problem with user centricity. And then you solve it using data, AI, next generation technology. Sometimes you can use traditional technology. Then you automate the solution to free up time to find the next problem. And you use agile ways of working so you can do this as fast as possible. Because the beauty of that approach is not just that it's simple, it's the fact that if you want to learn, you can do this not once, not twice, not 10 times, but you have to do this 50, 100, 1,000 times. And the more you go through this Mars Digital Engine, the more likely you will progress your learning opportunity as fast as possible. And that's really, what's behind the essence of Triton. And Triton is a very iconic use case in Mars Wrigley, where we have unleashed the power of the Mars Digital Engine. We have more than 75 use cases where we have used the exact same methodology of finding the problem with design thinking, solving with AI and technology, automating the solution, and all of that being powered by design thinking. So what's the story of Triton? It's a pretty simple story. The story started in April, where we started to listen to our consumer, worrying about, the quality of Halloween in 2020. Halloween is a very important ritual in the US. And for an organization like Mars Wrigley, it's a make or break season in terms of performance. So try to do everything we can to save Halloween was really the starting point when we started to listen to consumers. So we interviewed consumers, we connected with them with various models, and I'll share with you a few examples. And then we tried, slowly but surely, we have started to create, how can we connect this opportunity to the Mars Wrigley purpose, which is to create better moments to make the world smile, and how we can do that in a way where we can create mutual benefits across the entire Halloween ecosystems. And so we've been building a number of prototypes. And every single week, we have started to define what a virtual trick-or-treating experience could look like for Halloween 2020, where you can decorate your door online, you can create your avatar, you can put your door on a map with geofencing capability. You can add families and friends to trick or treat, not just within your local neighbor, but actually in the entire United States. Then you start the process of purchasing your virtual candy. And as part of that, we had to create an entire virtual candy economy from scratch, which is again something we have been building day after day. And the more you fill your virtual candy ball, the more potential you create to have an exciting trick-or-treating experience during the whole month of October. So it's not just augmenting the experience on Halloween Day, it's to provide more gamification, more experience during the entire month of October, where you can trick, where you can treat, where you can do competitions with your friends and family, and hopefully create an augmented Halloween experience. Finally, you can redeem your favorite candies at your local customers, and you can do this, even showing up at the customer or getting your product being delivered at your place. So, the ideation, people look at trick-or-treat and, sometimes I get, that's a glorious idea. What's really important to show here, and that's very much the philosophy of the Mars Digital Engine, we have been building the experience week after week. We didn't come up with the end-to-end idea overnight. We started on April 24, and every single week we have started to create something more. And we have done that with an obsession on building prototypes, so we can confront those prototypes to end consumer, and we can get very rapid feedback. We have leveraged a partner of an ecosystem of strategic partners to do this as quickly as possible. And if I look at this slide, I can tell you in confidence what we have done in 6 weeks is usually something we would have done in usually 12 months in a normal circumstances. And what's also very important to understand in that approach is, again, people see Triton as the finished product, but the way to get there has been done fostering an emergent strategy. And I've tried to show, what was the life in the middle of a Triton Halloween. It's launching a number of prototypes. Some of them are failing. In fact, the majority are failing. Some of them are mutating. Some of them are succeeding. And the more we do this, the more we find a way to actually find the right solution, again, with an emergent strategy, which is a very, very different approach than the traditional approach. The way I use the comparison is, why chasing North Star when the sky is full of shooting stars? And for me, Triton is a great example of, trying to chase a shooting star. You only have a few window of opportunity, but if you do it with the right capability and the right mindset, then you have a chance to succeed. And I've tried to summarize what those mindset shifts are. You heard me talking about finding the right problem with user centricity, fostering a culture of reinforcement learning, finding the right solution with an emergent strategy. Of course, you need to be surrounded by world-class expertise. And finally, you need to embrace inclusion, speed, and agility to get as many perspectives as possible, and finally create the most purposeful solution for your consumers. The last slide I want to share with you is talking about one movie, one documentary that inspired me last year. Actually, it's a documentary about AlphaGo. It's actually a documentary you can see on YouTube. It's actually public right now. It's the story of Google DeepMind beating Lee Sedol, who was 18 times world champion at the game of Go. And for those of you who followed a little bit the competition between machine and humans, you may remember the first time that IBM Deep Blue has beaten Garry Kasparov at the game of chess. If you know the details, you would know that the method was a brute force approach from an algorithmic point of view. And most scientific people aware of the game of Go would say it would still take somewhere between 20 to 30 years for any machine to beat someone like Lee Sedol at the game of Go. Why? Because of the perceived impression that Go is a lot more creative, Go is a lot more complex. There is more permutation at the game of Go than there are particles in the entire universe. Yet in 2017, AlphaGo has managed to beat Lee Sedol 4-1. But again, same as the quote from Ray Solomonov, I was less impressed by the fact that AlphaGo managed to beat Lee Sedol. what I was really impressed about is that during the process, we humans have realized we were not so good at the game of Go. And together with machines, we have found a new way to play Go, new strategies, very creative strategies. And for me, that's the provocation. If you complement your exploitation world with an exploration world, of course, the goal is to create as many Triton use cases as possible. But ultimately, it's to increase the human learning opportunity and make this world a better place. So let's try to create smiles, as many as possible. But counterintuitively, the more we create those smiles one step at a time, the more we increase the likeliness to learn and to use those smiles to create a positive momentum. So that's it for me. I know I went fairly fast, but hopefully it was an inspiring story. And if you have any questions, I would be very happy to cover them.
That was a fantastic presentation, Romain, and I think I wouldn't have learned so much that what went to the back end of creating such a memory or digitizing Halloween unless I would have gone through the entire thing what you just spoke today. That was brilliant. That was brilliant.
Thank you so much, Anamika. Thank you so much.
What I'm still not able to, I'll tell you, if I'm playing the Monty Hall game, the challenge which you talked about, and they ask me, it's like, do you need a Skittles? Do you need M&Ms? Or do you need Twix? I'm still winning because I'm going to pick one of those for sure. So I'm sure I'm not going to lose in that game. But that was brilliant, Romain. The first question first. I think I have tons of questions, and Thomas just keeps sending me here. The first question which comes to my mind, nobody thought about creating an experience like Halloween app, right? Nobody except for Mars. Where did this idea come from? And what you just talked about, I'm sure this must not have, I know it just took 6 weeks to do it. I'm sure there must have been a solid architecture behind it, right? So what went into that?
Yes, it's a great question. And, I would love to give you a glorious story about all the things that we have done, to get there. I'm a fundamental believer that what's important here is to create the right foundation for your organization to have the courage and the willingness to pick up their phone and to call someone and to say, I have an idea. Because that's exactly what happened. I received a call on the 24th of July, and at the time, 24th of April, sorry, and at the time it was, it was a simple idea. Is, what can we do to digitize Halloween and save Halloween? And at the time, it was, it was not the full end-to-end idea we had, but the fact we created an environment for any associates at any level in the organization to have the courage to think differently, to pick up the phone and to say, I have an idea. That's the true gold. The idea itself, of course, it's a great idea. If I'm really honest, it sounds like a very obvious idea now when you think about it. It's nearly embarrassing, in fact, to think that no one before has thought about bringing some digital component to Halloween. In fact, I'm convinced that in the next Halloween season, with or without COVID-19, there will always be some element of digitization, some element of gamification, because it helps people to create and to strengthen community where you can trick or treat literally anywhere in the world. So again, if you think about community, if you think about commerce, there are every single reasons, to digitize Halloween more and more, and not to replace completely the Twitter treating experience, don't get me wrong. But again, I want to focus on the goose and not so much the golden egg. And, my own experience is it takes a couple of years to create an organization which has the courage and the capability and the mindset, not just to come up with one idea, but then to have the courage to progress this idea without any guarantee to be successful. I'll be honest with you, for the first few weeks, in fact, the first few months, I was still unsure how far we would go, if we would even go live. If we would go live, I was actually worried for this to be a complete disaster. But this is the big difference in terms of mindset. And that's, often we talk about leadership. We have here to talk about situational leadership. You can be a great leader in an exploitation mode. I like the analogy of music. For me, exploitation approach is when you play classical music. You have a beautiful music to play, and you try to play it in the best possible way. And it's very enjoyable. I like it. The exploration approach is a different type of player. Those are the bluesmen, those are the jazzmen. And so talking about leadership in general, I think is dangerous. We need to talk about leading in an exploitation world, leading in an exploration world, because if you want to stay relevant and competitive in an increasing VUCA world, you need to nurture this leadership exploration world. And, you know, again, if you look at jazzmen, if you look at classical players, they play in different fields. So fostering that for me was the most important one. And again, I love the idea itself. I think it's more important to look at creating the right condition for anyone in the organization to come up with an idea.
That's brilliant. And I know it's not, like as you said, I don't think so it's going to stop just at Halloween 2020. It's going to continue, and probably not just for Halloween, but every season. And
exactly.
This is just such an obvious idea that even gamification being there, nobody came up with this obvious idea, right? Or implemented it for the consumers. So absolutely. I think one of the questions from the audience, in fact, couple, let me just pick one, is what has been your biggest challenge in your digital transformation journey with respect to people, process, and technology?
So the biggest challenge is the one I mentioned. It's the concept of unlearning agility. And in fact, I will say this very candidly. The higher you go in the organization, the more difficult it is. Why? Because again, you build a number of key beliefs in your career, which are again very relevant in a relatively slowly changing world. And now you have to face a world that is moving at the speed of light. And so, you know, convincing senior leadership to change when, you know, most of their career has all be about trying to help people solving problems and actually giving them the solution is a very, very difficult objective. Sometimes I use the word leadership hooliganism, which is the tendency for leaders, including myself. I mean, I've seen myself falling a number of times into this trap where you just want to go very quickly from a problem to a solutions. And so you need to use a lot of techniques, a lot of artifacts. Design thinking is extremely important to try to ensure you can unlock those learning barriers. So that's really on the people side, and it's by far the most difficult barrier to unlock. I think from a systems point of view, if I look at Triton, we had a number of challenges. First of all, we never ever developed an app, and we never deployed an app on the App Store and the Google Play at the same time. We never had any experience in building a virtual candy economy. So we had to design this from scratch, and the way we've done it is we've tried to leverage our ecosystems of strategic partners to help us doing this. And even if you do it piece by piece, you still need to connect all the pieces together. I would say the last one is on prioritization. I can tell you, I'm proud of the experience we have implemented, but if I show you the backlog of ideas we could have implemented if we had more time, you could see how complex it was to stick to a timeline that you cannot move. Halloween is on October 31st, and that's it. If you miss the day, then you've missed the year. So going through this journey of building something from scratch on the fly, learning, courageously with quite a lot of pressure on you, and doing this with a lot of prioritization, I can tell you we'll have to write a book about it one day. But if you combine all of this, those were the biggest barriers to unlock. And that's why I'm so proud about the team, because whether it was difficult time, whether it was good time, we've managed to hold the team spirit together and keep that exploration mindset. We were supported by the management to do this, which ended up being just an amazing learning opportunity for myself and the team.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. How do you think the industry will evolve post this pandemic world? And what do you think would be the biggest game changers?
So I think if I look at the the confectionery category, I want to believe everyone will do something in the area of digital gifting, which is great because it's going to, it's going to raise the bar and it's going to create even more opportunity to ultimately grow the category. And if you're familiar with the CPG industry, most of the growth is coming from category growth. So, even if the competition is coming and, they find ways to deliver also great experience for Halloween, that's great. It's just going to create shared and mutual benefits for the entire category. So I want to believe that everyone is going to look at moments differently, whether it's Halloween, whether it's Easter, whether it's Valentine, whether it's Diwali, whether it's Chinese New Year, whether it's 11/11, and try to find ways through moments to create better experience, to create better smiles, and ultimately delivering mutual benefits across the entire ecosystem, consumer, customers, and employees, obviously. Exactly how it's going to be, I think we'll have to see. I think everyone will follow a structure of emergence, and probably the best ones will be the one to survive. So, we are already on the starting blocks. The reason I'm keen to share this story is I don't believe the idea itself is really the competitive advantage. The competitive advantage is to be able to execute at speed. This is by far one of the most difficult things. Is you have a good idea, but you have the ability to evolve this idea on the fly. I can tell you during the entire month of October, every single day we looked at the Apple Store, the Google Play, we took consumer review. We had 9 different sprints during the course of October to try to learn on the fly and to implement new capability, new functionality when we heard consumer, saying, oh, you could have done this, you could have done that. Wouldn't it be great to do this? Wouldn't it be great to do that? So this ability to react at speed and to be obsessed by consumer is for me the real competitive advantage.
Interesting. I have another question from John March. Was the Mars Wrigley team able to measure any revenue impacts for the 2020 Halloween season that directly attributable to the Triton concept?
Yes, so I won't be able to share all the metrics here. I mean, some of them we are keeping for us. The one thing I can tell you, we have managed to exceed 500,000 downloads for a first ever application, which is way beyond anything we could have expected. We have also managed to create more than 3 billion impressions, which is more than a Super Bowl, for example. So again, when you look at the business model here, you could look at the direct revenue, you could look at the indirect revenue, whether it's the impressions, whether it's the first party data that you acquire through Halloween and then you can use for other Halloween season, as well as for other parts of Mars Wrigley and for other moments. So we are still in the learning journey. We have yet to create value now that we have this this data and we have this momentum with strategic partners, a lot of customers, including Walmart in the US, who are looking at innovations. They saw this as a great opportunity to partner and to bring innovation to their customers. So, I want to be humble here. It's, exceeding expectation in terms of the target we set ourselves for year one. We have yet to uncover the full extent of the value we create here.
That's brilliant. 500,000. That's an amazing number. That's an amazing number, Romain. How do you apply the principle of music and arts into your everyday work? And how has that inspired you to think differently?
Yeah, so it's a great question, actually. It's probably the piece which I'm the most proud about, because the concept of reinforcement learning, and again, if you want to go deeper, there's a lot of videos about Bayesian thinking, Bayesian philosophy. It really helps you to try to answer the question how to know, which is a very difficult question. If you can answer this question, you can answer any other question in the world. And so, being self-aware of what is reinforcement learning, which usually starts with what we call priors. The priors are all the key beliefs, all the theory we know about the world, whether it's coming from our education, from our parents, from the scientific method. And then we have to take those priors and we need to confront them to new informations. And the Bayes formula, the Bayes rules is formalizing this from a mathematical point of view. Now, in my everyday life, I can tell you, I'm not applying Bayes rule, with numbers. I try to look at it, to guide me making decisions, to guide me evolving my key beliefs. So when I see something counterintuitive that goes against my decision, I try to ask myself the question, why? I try to explain this observation first with my own theory, my own priors, but then I try to explain it with someone else's hypothesis. And sometimes I try to also list additional hypotheses that actually do not exist. And it's really helpful because it guides you, it creates a structure, to learn ultimately. And the one thing I can tell you is anything you see that is counterintuitive is usually a gold mine of information. And that's, again, the scientific method. The scientific method is all about trying to prove things wrong. And if you fail to prove something wrong, then maybe you have something actually that is relatively accurate and close to the reality. So you can apply this in any discipline. And I'm not going to go there, but again, for my own my own life, I use that in a lot of different topics. And I learn a lot about myself. I learn about my own emotions. I learn about my education. I learn about some key beliefs. I never knew why I was having those key beliefs. So it's a great, platform to learn personally and to develop yourself.
Wonderful, wonderful. What business areas where Mars digital engine will be applicable, like D2C, B2B, supply chain, production, etc.?
Yes, well, actually, this is the beauty, because when we started the digital transformation, we have done it across Mars Incorporated. And Mars Incorporated is not just Mars Wrigley, it's also Mars Pet Care, which is an ecosystem to make a better world for pets. And it's also Mars Food. So, we are using the Mars Digital Engine in a number of disciplines, obviously the confectionery category. But if you look at pet care, there are a number of areas where we are using the Mars Digital Engine, where we are using artificial intelligence, design thinking to solve problems very, very differently. So again, we have more than hundreds across the entire Mars Incorporated use case, which, by the way, we are going to have a Mars AI festival in December to try to go through all those use cases, whether it's in supply, whether it's in demand, whether it's in human resource, whether it's in sustainability, whether it's in veterinary services, to try to identify those problem statements which a Mars Digital Engine approach can progress. And so again, I would love to come up to another session and show more of that. Today was just giving you a glimpse of the Mars Digital Engine with Triton, but again, we have used this exact same mindset for a number of other use cases across Mars Incorporated.
That's great. How are you going to leverage technology and Mars Digital Engine to personalize nutrition across the Mars brand?
It's a great one. So I'm trying to find the best example between food, confectionery, and also pet. There's a lot of use case at the moment going on. Obviously, personalization is a big deal at the moment. And so we are trying to use, first-party data, whether it's for consumers, whether it's for pets, to find the best formulations. So coming up with a number of different formulations and identify which are the formulations, making the most impact depending on the consumer cohort, whether you're in sport, whether you're in healthy life, and to try to find, again, the best way to formulate something. It could be full nutrient, it could be energy, it could be connecting with people, and to try to adjust your portfolio accordingly. I think there's a lot more in the food space and in the pet space, so that's probably the one I would think about. But I'm more than happy to share with you offline more example about this specific question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Romain. I know I have Scott on the line and he wants to ask a live question. So, Tom, I'm not sure if you're able to unmute Scott and have him ask the question.
Yeah, Romain, Scott Jackson. I'm the pleasure of calling on Mars as your client executive globally, and absolutely wonderful presentation, and love your passion for learning and really the concept around unlearning and the unlearning agility, and found that very, very helpful. I was thinking, as complex and as global as and stable as your organization is, my question is, how does Mars really respond to what it learns at pace? And have you changed anything organizationally or structure-wise that allows you to move at that type of pace? Because I just know how complex the businesses are, and you know, how do you respond to that learning that you're continually doing?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and again, I'd love to give you a very smooth journey, and you know, this is the recipe for success. Actually, the way to make progress, you have to have a bit of an insurgent mentality here. The way I like to describe it is, again, when you play jazz, jazz is the art of creating tension and resolving tension. And so when you have an idea like Triton, I can tell you the first 6 weeks of Triton, the golden rule was, let's keep the team as small as possible so we don't fall into the trap of aligning with 10,000 people, having 50 governance meetings to agree the scope. Let's build prototype at the speed of light, and if we create tension along the way, let's face this tension and let's resolve it, and let's create another phase of tension. So you have to find the right balance, because if you create too much tension too quickly, then you alienate the rest of the organization. But the problem is, if you don't have that insurgent mentality, you will just follow the standard ways of working, which have been defined in an exploitation model, and which usually is good for large initiatives to deliver efficiency and scale. So I'm a firm believer that building an exploration approach doesn't come with a organizational structure. It comes with the right mindset. It comes with the mindset of servant leadership, for example. If you are a leader to try to foster a culture of exploration, the last thing you should do is create barriers. The first thing you should do is unlock all the barriers that your teams are asking you to unlock. It could be legal barriers, it could be finance barrier, it could be people barriers. The way, what you need to do from a structure point of view is you need to create product line organization, agile team. So you have this concept of individual specialism, but collective diversity. So everyone in the team brings unique skills to the table, and ideally, world-class skill. But when you combine everyone together, you can cover everything. So in the Triton team, we had people coming from all areas of the business, from legal, from finance, from supply, from sales, from marketing, from IT, pretty much every one of them. We had daily stand-up, we had backlog. So again, you can spend a lot of time to design your OD, with thousands of bugs, and usually it takes a couple of years to implement, and then you need 6 months to build the mindset. Or you can go with this insurgent mentality. You are going to lose a few teeth in the process, but if you are doing it for the right reasons, I can tell you will make progress a lot faster. So I can say this with confidence now. When you are in the middle of it, I can tell you there is a lot of heat, and you need to be courageous along the way. But again, I'm a firm believer that this concept of servant leadership, fostering a culture of exploration, is way more important than finding the right structure.
Incredible. Thank you very much. Incredible insight.
That's wonderful, Romain. Thank you, Scott, for asking that question. Not to put you on a spot, Kanami-san, I don't know if you have any direct question. I have 2 more. I'm going to take 2 more questions from the audience, just in interest of the time.
Actually, thank you very much, Romain. Actually, this is really great presentation, and also I see a lot of similarity of the between the Mars and the Fujitsu. For instance, like you talk about the user centricity. The Fujitsu's put our center is a human-centric intelligent society. How to create the innovation centered around people. So this is really important. Also, I'm very much interested in the jazz concept, and I like jazz too. But that's the kind of session to create. I think one of the an important thing is trust. Trust people, trust each other. How to create the harmony, or how to hand over to the next level of the rhythm or session. So I think lots of things maybe created that based upon the trust. So I think I need to understand your comment about trust.
The jazz analogy is beautiful because again, I'm not a good jazz player, but you could probably see some instrument in the background. I aspire to be one, and what's very important in jazz is you need to listen what's going on. You need to listen the drummer, you need to listen the bass player, because if you know what keys you're in, if you know how keys are evolving, then you can improvise, and then you can create the emotion, and then you can bring some tension, and you can resolve the tension. So improvising is often a result of a lot of preparation, but on the fly, what's most important is not how many notes you play at the minute. What is the beauty of the one single note you play at a certain point in time, and that note will be directly correlated with the quality of listening and the quality of trust within the band. So again, this is a topic of passion, and we can spend a lot more time on the analogy between the music and the businesses. But this is an area which really helps to learn, in simple way, using analogy across different disciplines.
Yeah, and also sometimes a big corporation like a Fujitsu thinking orchestration. So that's the another analogy is how to really create the orchestrating the team to having a great sounds of the music. So
yeah,
this is really interesting.
Just being cognizant of the time here. I think I don't have any time to ask any more questions, so apologies to the audience. I have tons of other questions to put to you, Romain, but which I can't. But I'm going to say thank you so much. This was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you for sharing everything what you shared today. In full confidence, as you were talking about Mars Digital Engine, I had my 2 daughters walked in and they wanted me to put this to you and say, this is their engine to take out the Mars they use, like, they get the Mars candy. So they wanted to say thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, honestly, thank you for the opportunity. I love the Triton story, but I love to share my story about learning, because the more we can help people to learn, the more we can make this world a better place. So feel free to ask questions, reach out on LinkedIn, and let's continue the conversation. I want to learn more myself, so I would love to compare notes, challenge each other, and again, try to use that as a way to get better.
Thank you, Romain. Thank you, everybody, for joining the session today. And we will have the recording coming your way to all the registered participants. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.